Welcome to my channel. This time I'm going to show you a family movie about love. This story is about a man named Sam. He is a grown man with an intellectual disability. He worked a day as a waitress at a Starbucks store, and that day coincided with his wife giving birth. So Sam rushed to the hospital following Rebecca, who was already lying down about to give birth. Rebecca is a homeless woman who takes advantage of Sam. At that moment she gave birth to a baby girl. Sam named his daughter Lucy. Rebecca didn't want the baby from the beginning. When she got out of the hospital, she ran away and left her with her baby alone. The reason is to have children and take care of them is not the life she wants. Finally, Sam, who has an intellectual disability, took care of Lucy alone. Of course, Sam has the hassle of taking care of the baby alone. Until finally when Lucy cried continuously in the middle of the night. Her neighbor Annie called and helped her. Annie explained to Sam that babies should be fed every 2 hours. Because of Annie's help, Sam understood. Sam with an intellectual disability has friends who also suffer from the same disorder. Because of them, Sam's life becomes not lonely. They support each other, even have regular activities that they do together. Lucy is often brought in at Sam's work, but as Lucy gets bigger the day Sam is troubled. So every morning he left Lucy to Annie. Sam is trying to be a good father. Lucy is 7 years old and ready to go to school. One afternoon at the restaurant, Lucy once asked Sam, "Why is he different?
You're not like other daddies."
Why isn't Sam like a father in general? Sam was sad and apologized. Seeing her father sad, Lucy immediately comforted her father and said that it wasn't a big deal and she felt lucky to have a father like Sam. To get Lucy into school, Sam and his friends bought Lucy a pair of shoes. When going to pay, Sam money is less. But cool, Sam's friends help to add less money.
It's okay, Sam, because I have $3 to contribute.
A very warm friendship that can be taught by special people like them. It was Lucy's first day of school. At school, Lucy gets a friend named Connor, a boy who keeps asking Lucy, "Is Lucy's father a man of intellectual impairment?" Lucy certainly didn't feel ashamed to answer that. It was true that her father had an abnormality. But Lucy doesn't like it when this friend vilifies her father. Every day Sam reads to Lucy before going to bed. Sam always reads stories from the same book. Sam is not good at reading. He's just memorizing the contents of this book.
How can we be so
One night Lucy gets a new book from school, but because she sees Sam who has difficulty reading, Lucy took the initiative to give a storybook that is always read every night so that Sam can do his role as a father who reads stories to his son before going to bed. One afternoon at school, Sam is called by the principal. They tell Sam that Lucy is a smart girl, but she holds herself back from growing.
Afraid to learn.
It was as if he was afraid to learn. This was realized by the teacher based on the picture Lucy made.
Mr. Dawson, it's becoming clear.
In addition, the Department of Child Services has contacted the school and informed that Sam's intellectual ability is only equivalent to that of a 7-year-old. The school is worried about how Lucy gets older. Evidently at night in the presence of Sam, Lucy pretended to be unable to read a few words. A few nights ago, he taught Sam to read. Lucy says she's stupid and isn't good at reading.
I'm stupid.
You are not stupid.
Something that makes Sam angry, because he already knows that Lucy is holding herself back from learning. "I don't want to read it." "If you can't read either," says Lucy. "Listen to that." Sam said, "Don't do that because hearing you read is what makes me happy." "It makes me happy," Sam said. Lucy understood and she began to read it fluently. One afternoon, on Lucy's birthday, Sam plans to throw a surprise party for her. At the same time, Child Services Department officers arrived.
Department of Child and Family Services, we met at the police station.
Then when Lucy was on her way home, one of Lucy's friends couldn't cooperate. Sam was annoyed, then argued with the boy's father. And with Lucy coming, things get even more chaotic with the unnecessary words of this child stating that Sam is Lucy's adoptive father.
She said you're not her real father anyway. She said she was adopted.
Lucy also ran away to witness the incident. The officer immediately called the department to take the next steps. Sam can't control his emotions and endanger other children. That's why a detention decision was taken until a formal hearing was held to decide the situation. Sam must fight the state court in terms of custody of Lucy. Unfortunately, Sam has to find a lawyer or a state that will provide a lawyer for Sam. While waiting for the trial, Sam is allowed to see Lucy 2 times a week for 2 hours.
I mean that you will see Lucy 2 times a week for 2 hours.
Sam's friends support Sam to find another lawyer, because if you use a state's attorney then it is likely that Sam will lose. One of Sam's friends advised him to go to the best lawyer's office whose ads were in the yellow pages. Then Sam went there to meet with a famous and professional lawyer named Rita. After listening to a long story from Sam, Rita was blunt, that Sam would not be able to hire Rita because of the expensive pay. Rita apologized to him. But Sam didn't just give up. Sam asked, "How would you feel if your son was taken and forbidden to meet you?" Listening to that, Rita asks Sam to give his phone number to Rita's secretary and promises to recommend someone to help Sam.
I'll see if she can help you and leave your number with Patricia.
At his workplace, Sam requests that Sam's position be raised from waitress to coffee maker so he can pay a lawyer. But his boss has not been able to grant Sam's request. The other day Sam came back to the office and loudly asked again about the man Rita had promised. Sam's voice was so loud that he sounded like everyone else. In order not to be ashamed of her office friends, Rita was no less loud to say to Sam, "Didn't I say that I was your lawyer for free?"
Pro bono, it's free.
Listening to that, Sam was excited. Sam then gave a letter from the court. The letter asked Sam to go to a mental hospital that day. Because it was not too much time if Sam went by bus, Rita also drove him there. The day to meet Lucy arrived. But unfortunately, Sam, who brought a cake for Lucy, also missed the bus, which caused her to be late. Luckily, Lucy waited for Sam until the last minute. They also spoke in a room. What Lucy talked about was watched and recorded by officers. Even the clever Lucy boldly shouted that she didn't want another father. In addition to Sam and Lucy, the officers took note of it. Rita started working to help Sam. Rita tells Sam to gather witnesses who can explain that Sam is a good father. Predictably, what Sam brought in to be a witness were Sam's friends. Rita was a bit stressed listening to answers from Sam's friends. Rita judged they wouldn't help at all in court. Sam persuades Annie to appear at the trial as a witness, but Annie refuses. He said his presence there would make things worse. The trial began. The first witness was a psychiatric doctor assigned to examine Sam. He gave the results when he checked on Sam some time ago. Fortunately, Rita has a great ability as a lawyer. He managed to counter the witness's statement so as not to incriminate Sam at the trial. The next witness was a doctor. The doctor was raised by a mother who had a low IQ. It's almost like Sam. Rita says that a person's intellectual ability has nothing to do with their ability to love. Once again Rita managed to win the situation. Meanwhile, the ration 2 times a week for 2 hours turned out to make Lucy take the initiative. When the visit time ends, Lucy lies to Sam that the guards are letting them go to the park.
She said we could go to the park.
While on the bus, Lucy tells the truth and invites Sam to run away because he has heard the case that there is a child separated from his parents. At night while staying at the park, a policeman finds them both. And at 3 a.m. Rita must come there and scold Sam for Lucy's attempted abduction from the court. Rita pleaded with the officer not to disclose the matter in court. At least let this father and son get another chance. Lucy also asks Rita not to give up on their case. Lucy apologizes for running away from court for her idea.
It was all my idea.
The next day, Lucy was tried and questioned about Sam. Lucy is very articulate, but it's a pity when the lawyer asks where she slept last night. Lucy could only be silent. After that Lucy said, "All I need is the love of a father."
All you need is love.
On the other day of the trial, Sam's boss at Starbucks was present as a witness. The state's attorney certainly wants to incriminate Sam with questions. Can Sam just tidy up the table and deliver orders? That's all he can do because of his low IQ. Then the boss said, "Not really, I'm going to promote Sam to make coffee." A statement that upset the lawyer. On another day Rita was worried when Sam's friend would come forward as a witness. Luckily that day Annie came to his aid. Annie's presence is certainly very helpful because Annie is the closest person and also Lucy's godmother. Moreover, he is an educated person. Annie explained that Sam was a good father. Although Sam often knocks on the door of his apartment to ask a lot of questions. But because of Sam, Lucy grew up as a strong child who had empathy for everyone. Then Rita asked Annie, "Aren't you worried about Lucy's future with Sam?" Annie replied, "Yes, I'm afraid that if the country separated Lucy from her father it would take a very large part of her and she would spend her life trying to fill that hole."
Trying to fill that hole.
The lawyer asked, "Can Sam be mathematical?" Annie says that Sam can add and for multiplication is still learning. The lawyer asked again, so Sam could not answer the question 2 by 2 equal to how much? Annie replied, "I don't know about you but my memories with my parents have nothing to do with your multiplication table or the nation's capital." For the next trial, it was Sam's turn. So Rita invites Sam to train at his house. They arrived at Rita's mansion. Although successful, Rita's relationship with her son can be said to be a problem. Her son was always lonely because Rita and her husband always worked and there was no time for Willie his son. Sam is very difficult to teach, this makes Rita confused. Rita teaches Sam to answer her questions with a simple reply, but with the right answer. Rita even trained Sam with questions that the opposing lawyer was likely to ask. For tomorrow's trial, Rita lent Sam her husband's suit and it made him look very handsome. The day that Sam as a coffee maker in Starbucks began. At first all goes smoothly, but due to too many orders and people asking for it quickly Sam becomes overwhelmed and messes things up. Because it was too late to the trial he had to run and present with a messy appearance. Rita tried to have a brief discussion with Sam before Sam messed up the trial by forgetting the rehearsals they did last night. Fortunately, Rita's questions were well answered by Sam. Rita was also satisfied with the performance that Sam showed. Then it was the turn of the opposing lawyer who asked. Sam was asked questions that were too heavy for him to answer. At first, Sam was able to answer those questions convincingly until he answered one question with a reference to the dialogue in the film. It was caught because one of Sam's friends reminded the continuation of the dialogue that made the judge wonder and made the opposing lawyer hold back his laughter. Sam didn't even say when the lawyer asked about what it would take to raise a daughter. Sam also gave up when the lawyer said if you love your child, wouldn't it be better to let go of Lucy with your parents? Because he deserves better. Don't you ever doubt yourself every day? Sam answered the question and could no longer afford the question that incriminated him. Rita also knew the end of this trial. Sam lost in the trial.
This is the end of this for me, okay?
He and Lucy were separated, something sad for both of them. Once Sam wanted to visit Lucy at his foster parents' house. But when he gets there, Sam thwarts his intention to meet Lucy. Sam spent his day lonely. Even on the day of his first evaluation, Sam was not present. This makes Rita angry and comes to Sam's apartment. Rita tells Sam that custody of Lucy can return if Sam can make a living and provide a new apartment with a special room for Lucy. Because that's the condition requested by the court. But Sam says maybe Lucy is happy with her new family and doesn't need it anymore. Sam is stressed. Because no matter how hard he tried, he always failed. He even told Rita that his position didn't benefit because he was born like this. Rita was angry because she heard the complaint. Rita told me that behind her success, she had a husband who slept with other women. She even felt small and useless when her son hated her. And then Rita cried. Day by day, Sam tries to earn extra income by keeping and caring for the dogs. That morning he finally visited Lucy. Sam is greeted by Randy, Lucy's foster parents. Randy also kind of scolded Sam for always not being present in court for evaluation. Sam apologized for that. When Lucy came out, she was also angry at Sam for not calling or visiting her since losing in court. Sam cried apology during the evaluation in court. Rita and Sam are deadlocked. Especially when hearing the news that Lucy's foster parents will proceed to the adoption process and the court will encourage it. After the meeting, Rita told Sam that they no longer had a chance. But there's one thing they can still do. If Sam gives guardianship to Lucy's parents, then Sam will get more visiting rations and it almost resembles joint custody. One afternoon Randy accompanied Lucy to sell cakes at his scouting activities. Unexpectedly they met Sam. It turns out that Sam has moved apartments and he chooses an apartment close to Randy's house to make it easier to meet Lucy. This is very regrettable by Randy because they should still have to meet in court regarding custody issues. One night, Lucy runs from Randy's house to Sam's apartment because she can't sleep. But Sam takes Lucy back to Randy's house because Sam doesn't want to be accused of kidnapping Lucy again. This happens almost every night. Lucy always runs away and visits her father. Randy also understands the relationship between father and son. Randy tells Lucy that she wants to visit her father, just tell him and he won't ban Lucy for it. One afternoon Rita and her son came to see Sam. Rita gave her a suit for tomorrow when she was in court together. As usual, they exercised before facing a custody-related trial. In the evening, Randy and Lucy arrive. Randy says Lucy fell asleep in their car. Randy will initially take Lucy home, but she's afraid she'll wake up and can't sleep, so she drives Lucy to Sam's apartment. Randy said, "Tomorrow in court the plan will be to say that I will give you a love that Lucy never got before. But I'm not going to tell you because it's a lie. Nothing can replace the love you gave Lucy," Randy said. He tells Sam to provide a seat next to him to sign that Randy will cancel his planned full adoption of Lucy and agrees to share his custody with Sam. All parents will certainly face various obstacles with their shortcomings. Sam manages to make Lucy feel at home.
Thank you, Sam.
He raised Lucy with love and affection. This film has opened our eyes not to underestimate people like Sam. They have different desires and thoughts. We have to have great respect and treat them like normal people in general. Even so, they are friends, relatives, or parents that we should appreciate. Okay, that's the story. Never get tired of being a good person.